Ezra Hashem, today's Amud in Maseches Berachos is Samach Beis Amud Aleph 62a. We're starting at the top of the page at Tanya, Amar Rabbi Akiva, the first words on the page. We're going to have two sections in today's learning. We will be turning our attention from the last discussion, which talked about going to the bathroom in particular directions because of the issues of being opposite the Shechina. And we'll turn our attention now to general halachas of the bathrooms. In the first section, we'll have a couple of stories highlighting general practices in the bathroom and also in other private areas. And then in the second section, we'll get into more particulars, the more specific details about shadim and how to avoid them and other ways of not becoming damaged in the bathrooms. Be'ez Hashem, let's get started. Top of the page, Tanya. Tanya Rabbi Akiva says, one time Rabbi Akiva followed after his Rabbi Yoshua in the bathroom. And it seems like he witnessed the behavior of Rabbi Yoshua in the bathroom, who was his Rabbi. And he said, I learned three things from my Rabbi. Number one, this is like we said yesterday. You're not supposed to relieve yourself from between the east and the west, means facing or back to the east or the west, but rather north and south, which we explained yesterday. The Shechina is in the east, opposite that's the west, and therefore the Shechina between east and west, that's not the appropriate place to relieve oneself, but rather north and south. And I also learned that when you uncover yourself to defecate, it should only be when you're already sitting down. That's more tsanua, more modest, not when you're still standing. And number three, we'll explain this why later. You're supposed to wipe yourself and clean yourself after defecating with the right hand, not with the right hand, but rather with the left hand. We'll see why this is later. So Rabbi Akiva said this is what he had witnessed and learned from his Rabbi Yoshua. Ben Azai piped up, and Omar Lei, Ben Azai turned to Rabbi Akiva and he said, Ad kano azta ponecha berabcha, until here, you've acted disrespectfully towards your Rebbe, means it's not appropriate. Why are you going to witness what your Rebbe does in the bathroom? That doesn't seem to be appropriate conduct. Omar Lei, Rabbi Akiva responded, Toirayi velil mo'id tzarich. He said, this is Torah, and I need to learn. Greatest way to learn from somebody, especially from a Rebbeim like this, is by witnessing them in action. Not the words they teach you, but the behavior that you can learn and therefore follow after them. It's the modeling. That's where you learn, really. So that's also true when it comes to things that are private, that are perhaps deemed to be uncouth to witness. He said, I need to learn. And the Gemara tells us in turn, Tanya, the Brisa teaches Ben Azai, and Ben Azai said also after this incident seemingly, I went after my Rabbi Akiva. It was the last story with Rabbi Yoshua. So I went after Rabbi Akiva to the bathroom, menu, the same story. And I learned from him Gimel Devarim three things in the bathroom. Number one, I learned that you're not supposed to relieve yourself east to west, but rather north and south. Number two, that you shouldn't uncover yourself when you're still standing. Rather sitting, that's more modest. And I also learned the third thing, that you should wipe yourself with your left hand, not your right hand. We'll see why this is later. It's going to be a few pshatim. Amar le Rabbi Yehuda. Now in this story, Rabbi Yehuda turned to Ben Azai and he said, Ad kano azda panecha berabcha. Until now you are brazen or acting disrespectfully towards your Rebbe. How's that appropriate to go witness your Rebbe in the bathroom? And Ben Azai responded, Amar lo, Ben Azai said, Torah hi. This is Torah. How am I supposed to conduct myself? And I need to learn, meaning that I need to learn how he was doing it also. Seemingly, it's the same things that Rabbi Akiva learned from Rabbi Yoshua, but perhaps Ben Azai wanted to know, is this the Lamaisa? Is this how Rabbi Akiva Lamaisa practices so that I know that that's how I should also behave? The Gemara tells us a similar story now. This was not a Talmud following his Rebbe to the bathroom, but one could argue in an even more intimate moment. And again, these stories, l'chayra, we could say, on people on very high levels, where this is not considered disrespectful and inappropriate, that would be considered appropriate. Perhaps today, though, to witness a Rebbe in such a intimate, private moments, it wouldn't necessarily be so appropriate. But the Gemara says a similar story of Kahana. Ol gana tuse porya de Rav. Rav Kahana, I guess he knew that Rav was going to have relations with his wife. Perhaps it was the night that Rav's wife went to the mikvah. So he went and lied under the bed of Rav that he would have relations with his wife. Again, I wouldn't suggest this today. Shamei, so he heard this sach, that Rav spoke with his wife. V'sachak, he laughed with her. V'asat tzrachav, and then it literally means he did his needs, but he had relations with her. So Rav Kahana's under the bed, and he's listening in to what's going on above with Rav and his wife. Amar lei, so Rav Kahana called out to Rav, and he said, Dame pume de Abba, the mouth of Abba, that's a way of referring to Rav, is kidlei sharif tafshil, it's like you never swallowed a dish. What he was saying was, you're engaging in this intimacy with such zeal and enthusiasm like you never had relations before. This is Rav Kahana under the bed giving musar to his Rabbi Rav, who's on the bed with his wife. Amar lei, so Rav's called back to Rav Kahana. Now, from the response you see, this wasn't necessarily deemed usher or grossly inappropriate, but Rav, because otherwise Rav, you try this day, you'll get shot. But Rav turns to Rav Kahana and he says, Amar lei Kahana. So Rav said to Rav Kahana, Kahana, Hachat, are you here? Poik, get out of here. Dalav erechara, it's not derechara, it's not appropriate. It's a very interesting thing. His response wasn't, what are you doing here? Get out of here. You shouldn't be here. It's not derechara, it's you shouldn't be here. So Amar Loi, so Rav Kahana again responded the same as the last two stories. The way we behave in the bathroom, the way we behave with our wives, the way we behave in the most intimate of moments is determined by the Torah, and I need to know, so I want to learn from you how I'm supposed to conduct myself. These are incredible stories, and they show us the level that these people were on. It wasn't necessarily considered grossly negligent or inappropriate to witness these things. The opposite, it was almost necessary to know how to behave. So as the Gemara, we had mentioned above that you're not supposed to wipe with the right hand, but rather with the left. So the Gemara says, So we're going to have a series of answers for this. But what's the reason that your taka is supposed to wipe with the left and not the right? So Rav is the first answer. Amar Rava, the Torah was given by HaKadosh Baruch Hu's right hand, kiviyachol, as if to say. Like the pasuk says, from his right hand, Hashem's right hand, the fiery laws were given, were from him. So is there symbolism in the pasuk that the right hand has chashivos and we shouldn't wipe with it, rather with the left. Rabbi Bar Bachana Amar Mipnei Shehi Karoi Velepes. Rabbi Bar Bachana says a second answer, because the right hand is near the mouth, meaning when we eat, we use our right hand. We don't want to use our right hand for wiping as well. It's a lack of hygiene. It's going to be an issue. For Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says a third answer. Very interesting answer. So the Maharsha explains, what does it mean? Is that you tie actively the tefillin with your right hand. Now you bind the tefillin on your left hand. But since you're binding it actively, which is more of an action versus a passive motion, that it's bound onto the left hand, there's significance given to the right hand, and you shouldn't wipe with it, rather with the left. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says a fourth answer. Now, this is a fascinating idea. You show the trup, the cantillations, when you read the Torah with your right hand. So Rashi explains over here that there's these special, we know this trup or cantillations, ta'amim, that is the music of the Torah. And when you read the Torah, Rashi seems to say here, Tarnavim and Ksuvim, you would also motion with your right hand the ta'amim. So therefore, it wouldn't be appropriate to use that same hand for wiping. And Rashi says, Ra'isi b'koyrim ha'aboyim me'eretz Yisrael. I've seen this practice done by people who come from Eretz Yisrael. This is seemingly not referring to how someone will show the trup to another who's reading the Torah so he can know what to do, but it's the reader himself would make these motions, and that has some chashivas to the right hand, therefore he would do it with his right hand, and therefore you shouldn't wipe with the right hand. Now the Gemara says, actually, this is not just a machlokes amoraim in terms of the reason, but kitanoi, it's a machlokes tanoim. Rabbi Eliezer said, like we said, the second answer above. Since you eat with your right hand, it will be a lack of hygiene to also wipe with it. Rabbi Yeshua says the reason that you're not supposed to you wipe with your right hand is because you write, and this is very interesting, this is a new reason, because you write stam, you write Sifrei Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzos, things of Kedusha with your right hand, and therefore it wouldn't be appropriate to also clean yourself with it. Rabbi Akiva Aimer, Mipnei Shemara Ba Ta'amei Torah. This is similar to the last answer we gave above, And the Gemara says, because you, like Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, because you make the motions of the ta'amim, of the trup with your hands while you read the Torah, therefore it has chashivas and it's not kedai, it's not appropriate to wipe with it. Continues the Gemara about being modest in the bathroom. Anybody that is modest in the bathroom, he is saved from 3 damaging forces. From snakes and scorpions that seem to have frequented the bathroom, as well as from mazikin, which are like demons or damaging forces. Now Rashi learns, although one would say l'chaira, it's like a segula. It's you do a good thing, so you'll be saved from these 3 things. But Rashi learns it's actually a practical issue here. If you're tsanua, you're quiet and modest in the bathroom, the snakes and scorpions won't realize you're there and fight with you. And similarly with the mazikin, they'll have mercy on you and they won't bother you. The Yashayimrim back in the Gemara, and some say, Af chalei moisav miyushavim, alav. Also, a person who's modest in the bathroom, his dreams won't be disturbed, Rashi says, by mazikin that would interfere with him and cause him problems. The Gemara tells us a story. There was a bathroom in Tiberia. Now, this bathroom was so frequented by these mazikin that even if 2 people would go into this bathroom, afilu biyamama, even in the day. Now, that's usually 2 protections from the mazikin. It's 2 people, and during the day are 2 different ways of being protected from them. But even if it was 2 people during the day, mitziki, they would get damaged. This was a heavily dangerous bathroom. Rabbi Ami v'Ravasi havu ayli bei chad v'chad l'chudei, and yet Rav Ami and Ravasi used to go individually to this bathroom. V'lay mitziki, they weren't damaged. So Ami l'Rabbanan lay mistafitu. He said, Rabbanan said to Rabbi Ami and Ravasi, aren't you worried about these damaging forces? So Amrulei, Rabbi Ami and Ravasi said back, Anon Kabbalah Gamrinan. We have the following tradition that we've received. Kabbalah, there's a tradition, the Beis HaKisei, tzini usa v'shtikusa. Is that in a bathroom you should be modest and quiet. And actually, as we said, that affords protection, so that we're not worried about that. And also, Kabbalah, we have another tradition, the Isure, that when it comes to suffering, shtikusa omibai rachami. Instead of being upset at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, rather you should be silent and accept the Gzar Din, whatever it is, and daven that it should be fixed. Now, the Gemara tells us certain rabbis, or when they were kids, or we'll see when they get older too, certain things that were done, that they used to do in order to be protected from these damaging forces. Abaye, mirabya le ime imra, lemeo ba'adei lebeis hakise. Very interesting. Abaye, we know his mother passed away when he was a baby, but he was raised by an adopted mother. So his adopted mother raised a lamb that would go with him into the bathroom. It's a fascinating idea. It's not just if there's 2 people together that the mazikim seem to go away from them. But even if there's another living creature, in this case a lamb, so his mother, or his adopted mother, would have a lamb that she raised that would go along with him to the bathroom as protection. L'chayra mikan is dogs are a good idea to have for protection. So here it's for mazikim, in other cases perhaps for other things. So asks the Gemara, why didn't you raise a goat? Why specifically a sheep? So the Gemara answers, very interesting, Sa'ir b'sa'ir michlaf. Apparently, as Rashi explains, the shedim, or the mazikin in the Beis HaKisei, in the bathroom, are like goats. And therefore, if it was only a goat, it would be interchanged with it, or so as to mean that it wouldn't afford protection. But if it's a sheep, it's something that's different, then it would afford a level of protection against these mazikin. Rava Mekamed Aviration. Now the Gemara tells us a similar story. Rava, before he became the Rosh Hashiva, so he was considered not the highest level of being Rosh Hashiva, and therefore the mazikin would damage him like they damage anybody else. So when he would go to the bathroom outside the house, Mikarkisha Le Basar of Chizda, the daughter of Rav Chizda, who was his wife, would rattle Amguza Belakna, a walnut in a copper receptacle of sorts, which would make noise, and apparently, as she was in the house, he was outside doing what he needs to do, and it would scare away these mazikin to some degree, or the snakes, etc. But Basar de Malach, once he became the Rosh Hashiva, and as we learned earlier, Sheidim are particularly interested in bothering Talmidei Chachamim and in damaging them. So he needed an additional level of protection when he'd go to the bathroom. So Avdalei Kavsa, she made a window between the house and where he would relieve himself outside, Uman Chalayad Areshe, and she put her hand on his head. Such is actually the advice that seems to be brought down in Halacha for a child who's going to the bathroom in terms of assisting, or perhaps an adult even. But this is what she used to do, needed more of a person nearby in order to scare away these mazikin. Let's move on out of the second section. The Gemara now is a machlokes regarding a person who needs to relieve himself. So it's in a semi, or we're going to see semi or public area. How is the appropriate way to do so? We're going to have a machlokes about this. Amar Ula says, Ula, if somebody is behind a fence, he could relieve himself immediately, which means even if he's close to other people, and perhaps they even see him to some degree, but if it's behind a fence, he's allowed to relieve himself already. Ubebika, but if it's in an open area, as long as if he would, in the process of relieving himself, pass gas, means make noise that would be perhaps an issue of tznius maybe, but as others can't hear, that would be already a sufficient distance that would be okay for him to relieve himself. This is the position of Ula. But means he could be very close by as long as it's behind a fence, and in an open area as long as they can't hear him conducting his business. Isi bar Nasan masni hachi. Isi bar Nasan learned differently. He said he was chaylik. No. If it's behind the fence, it has to be that he's still distanced from the other people, that people can't hear him, again, misatesh, passing gas, and meaning they can't hear him conducting his business. But in an open area, this is much farther. He has to be so far that others can't actually see him. We'll be Magdar explain what this means in a minute, but he actually has to be much more distant. Certainly they can't hear him, but even that they cannot see him. So Isi Bar Nasan says much farther. He says that they have to be far more distant than the position of Ula. Meisivei asked the Gemara Kasha. Now this is talking about how when it came to the production of oil, so the Talmidei Chachamim wanted their oil to be tahor. They didn't want Amaratzim walking in who could potentially contaminate it, make it tameh, even for chulin, because they were machmir on the tahara of the purification, the special status of purity when it came to their foods that they consumed. So the halacha is like this. The Brisa says, Yotzin, if he had to go to the bathroom, he had a shomer. As Rashi explains, they had shomrim, like they have today. Shomrim, you have mashgiach, who was there making sure that no amaratzim would walk in to touch the oil while it was being produced. So Yotzin, the Brisa says, if he has to go to the bathroom, Yotzin mi pesach beisabad, he can go out of the entrance of the olive press, v'nifnin, and relieve himself la'achari ageder v'hein tahirin. Relieve himself behind the fence, and they're tahor. Now the implication of the Brisa is he could just go behind the fence, even though it's close by, like Ula was saying, and the oil is still considered tahor because he was close enough that no Amar Aretz would have walked in. But the point is, you see, he doesn't have to go so far that he's not heard, like Isi Bar Nasan suggested, but rather he could be even closer by. Kashan Isi Bar Nasan. So the Gemara answers, no, really he would have to go distance, like Isi Bar Nasan said, but the reason over here it's not an issue is b'taharas hekilu. Really he would have to go farther, but for taharas, the purpose of keeping the oils and the foods tahor for Talmidei Chachamim, the Chachamim were lenient. Tashma, another kashan Isi Bar Nasan, kama yirchaku v'yutahirim. Now again, this is talking about a shomer who's watching taharas, food to keep them tahor from amaratzim coming to be metameh them. It's tahor as long as he could see them. Now, again, this is a very close distance, which sounds like the position of Ula, Kashan Isi Bar Nasan. So the Gemara gives two terutzim. Firstly, the Gemara says, Shani oichle taharas takilu b'hurabanan, similar to the prior answer. This is referring to oichle taharas, people that are eating things in tahara, and the Chachamim were lenient. They said, if you want to keep it that way, so he could relieve himself closer, even though it wouldn't fit the bill like Isi Bar Nasan laid out before. Ravashi says a second answer. My kol's man she'en chaveru roya. When Isi Bar Nasan said above that when it's in a bika, in an open area, it has to be the distance that nobody could see him, you're not understanding it right. Not that you can't see him altogether, but rather, rather what it means is that a person can't see where he's uncovered. So as to say, is that the area that he's uncovered of his skin, that cannot be seen. But even if the rest of his body could be seen, that's not necessarily an issue. And that's what it's talking about in this brisa, where he would go behind a fence to a distance that you can't see the area that's uncovered, and that fits with Isi Bar Nasan. The Gemara tells us a side story here. There was a eulogizer, someone had passed away, and he was giving a eulogy about the mace. And he was giving the eulogy in front of Rav Nachman, Omar, and he said the following. This fellow who passed away was exceedingly modest in his ways. Amalei of Nachman. Rav Nachman turned to this eulogizer and he said, did you go to the bathroom together with him? How do you know that he was so tzanua? You know that he was modest or not? The Tanya, like we know the Brisa says, ain't current tzanua, a person's only called modest if he's actually modest in the bathroom. Very interesting. In the innermost chamber where people don't know what's going on, that's a tzanua. Did you go to the bathroom with him? You didn't. So you don't really know. You shouldn't be saying this. Now the Gemara doesn't really understand. What's up, Rabbi Nachman's getting so excited about this? All right, he wants to say some praises for this fellow. What's the big deal? So the Gemara says, why does Rabbi Nachman care so much? So the Gemara answers with an incredibly powerful and scary statement. Mishum de Tanya, because the Brisa teaches like this. If somebody gets up at a funeral and he says things that are not true, false praises to the mace, kishem shenifraim min hamesim, just as the deceased are going to suffer because of that, kach nifraim min hasafdanin u'min ha'oinen acharein. So too, the eulogizer who's saying it's going to suffer, and those who say amen, meaning those people who accept what's going on and accept the praises that are being said. This is an incredibly powerful statement, and it's probably a good reason why we shouldn't have very many eulogies at our own funerals. Tana Rabbanan, Zak the Brisa, Ezu tzanua. What is the definition of a modest person? Zeh hanifne balay. It's a person who relieves himself. He defecates during the night in the same place that he defecates during the day. Now, during the day, we assume a person has to go far away from people. So the Gemara says, Eini, is this true? A person should accustom himself to defecating, to relieving himself in the early morning and late night, in order that he won't have to distance himself very far. Meaning the implication is that in order to, otherwise you have to go far out of the camp, you have to go far away. So the Gemara says l'chayra, what's a tzanua? We said earlier is somebody that's nifne b'layla b'makom shenifne b'yom. But here we're saying, in order that you don't have to be, you don't have to distance yourself far from. 1 second. Right, sorry. So what you see from here is, at nighttime, that's the point. You don't have to distance. It doesn't have to be b'makom. If it's at night, you could relieve yourself close to people because people aren't looking. And furthermore, we know Rava be a mama azil ad mil. Rava during the day, if he had to go to the bathroom, he'd go a mil away from people, a distance. But if it was night, Amar Lashami, he'd say to his attendant, Panoli duchta berachos v'damasa. I don't mind, just clear out some place in the street and it's okay. So you see clearly at night, you don't have to go so far to the same place as during the day. Rav Zer also said to his attendant, see if there's anyone there behind the base medrash. I need to go to the bathroom. Meaning the point is, as long as nobody was there, it was okay during the night. So Gemara gives a couple of terutzim. It doesn't mean b'makoim. During the day, you'll have to go farther away. During the night, if nobody's around, you can relieve yourself closer. But the point is, it means kederech. In the same way of modesty, that you relieve yourself during the day, Hashem sees what's going on, so you have to relieve yourself in the same way, meaning how much of your body you relieve, tefach tfachayim, like we know the halacha. Other halachas that are related to the bathroom, Rashi says, miyoshiv, also while you're sitting, you should uncover yourself, etc. That's the first pshat. Rav Ashi says second pshat, filotema b'makom. Really, it could be, like we said before, the same place. But le'nitzroch el lekeren zavis. Now he says a shtickle chiddush. Keren Zavis would mean is that if there is some sort of a corner, a private area, so that's ideally where you should go, both by day and by night as well. Gufa, Amar Rav said, person should accustom himself to relieving himself by day, morning and evening, so he doesn't have to go far away from people. Tani Nami Yochi, Ben Azai also taught the following, Hashkem Vitzei, Ha'arev Vitzei. Get up early, go to the bathroom, and go to the bathroom late at night. So you shouldn't have to go far away from people. Now the Gemara says another idea that Ben Azai taught us. Mishamish v'shev al teshev uteshamish. This is an idea they used to use like a suppository, basically, which was that they would use a little wood chip or something like that in order to open up their bowels. So the Gemara tells us it's ideal to do that while you're already sitting, before you're sitting, not after you're sitting. Apparently, this can cause some sort of a physical damage, and as we're about to see, that physical damage, my father was being masber actually, this is the vart. Now you're in a status of sakana, and now you're in a status of sakana, machashefos are able to attack you. Very interesting. Because if he first sits and then he tries to relieve him, create the manipulation to relieve himself, even if they're doing black magic in a faraway place, boy and love, it could affect him negatively. But let's say he forgot and he first sat and then he tried to assist himself in relieving himself. What should he do? So Gemara says, Kikoi, when he gets up, he should say the following. Loili, loili. It's an incantation to protect himself from kishuf. Not me, not me. Loitachim v'loitachtim. These are mazikim, or machashefos, associated with the bathroom, with excrement. Not this, not tachim and not tachtim, leihani v'leimahani, not a little bit of them, not a lot of them, leicharshi de charsha, leicharshi de charashta, not the wizard, the male sorcerer, and not the female sorcerer. None of that should affect me, and then it'll be protected. We're going to stop here, the bottom of Samach Beis Amud Aleph. We'll pick up tomorrow. Actually, Ben Azai is going to continue telling us tomorrow, Samach Beis Amud Beis, further health practices that are a good idea. Ezra Hashem. Okay, everyone have a great day.